Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jake Parker, Senior Director of Government Relations with the Security Industry Association, and you're joining us for a webinar called Interference Ahead. So before I introduce our other speakers, just wanted to say a word about the Security Industry Association, and also, by the way, presented by ISC as well. So our trade association is comprised of about 1,700 member companies that provide products and services in the physical security space, which is quite diverse. So access control, alarm systems, many other types of things you see on the screen here. And these are provided to a number of end user groups. So this is consumers, homeowners, but also government facilities, healthcare, retail, transportation, and many other types of critical infrastructure, as well as K-12 and college campus safety and security. So the subject, so joining us also is Lauren Bresette, who's Senior Manager of Government Relations at SIA. Thanks for joining us. And then we also have Howard Waltzman, who's a partner at Mayer Brown, where he advises clients on complex public policy issues involving technology. That includes artificial intelligence, privacy, cybersecurity, and communication services, among others. Before joining Mayor Brown, Howard served as the Chief Telecommunications and Internet Counsel for the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee. He had previously served as General Counsel for Senator Sam Brownback. So thanks for joining. Now, the subject today, we want to talk about the importance of the lower 900 megahertz band. So this is a area of spectrum that for over roughly 40 years, FCC's policy has established an unlicensed environment where there's been a tremendous amount of innovation, which has greatly benefited consumers. And today, there's millions and millions of devices that rely on this ecosystem in the unlicensed band. So there's a proposal before the FCC, however, that would put at risk this ecosystem, as the proposal would reorganize the band, lift Part 15 rules, and essentially privatize portions of it. And we'll explain why this is problematic. So the unlicensed spectrum really is been used across almost all industries, and to the point where a lot of aspects of modern life would be hard to imagine without it. So this particularly is the case for the safety and security industry products and services that are used by consumers every day. So I'll turn it over to Lauren to explain a little bit more about what kinds of products and services would be affected.
Sure. Thanks, Jake. And I believe on the next slide, we have just a visual for folks to see the different types of security and life safety devices that operate in this band. These are low power radio frequency security and life safety devices that have been operating in this band for the decades that the FCC rule protecting Part 15 use of the band has been in place. So these devices are high reliability. They have been peacefully coexisting for years in this band. And they're the types of devices that consumers really rely on for 100% reliability all the time. They're things like alarm systems, carbon monoxide detectors, electronic access control, medical pendants, panic alarms, just across the security ecosystem. These are important devices. And it really has a broad security industry impact. In October of 2024, there was a letter sent to Congress expressing concern about this petition that was signed by 92 security companies. And we have that linked in our blog post on our website publicly.
All right. So, Lauren, there's been a number of things happen regarding this
Mhm.
petition, and just give us an overview, if you would, over what has happened so far.
Yeah, of course. I'll try to be brief. This is a period of 2 years that this has been happening in, but it essentially all started in April of 2024 when the petition to restructure the lower 900 band was filed. And then later that year, in August of 2024, the FCC opened what's called a notice of inquiry, seeking comments specifically on this petition. So this is everything at the FCC that's been opened related to the petition in the lower 900 band. It's important to note that part of the reasoning that the petitioner uses for this restructuring and this removal of this interference rule is to create a backup GPS system that provides a reliable alternative. So separately, there was another docket opened at the FCC that explores these PNT alternatives. And the petitioner has also filed in that docket as well as SIA. So that was open in February of 2025. And that we'll get into this in a minute, but that shows really that this is not the only backup GPS alternative out there. There's over 200 comments filed in that docket. There's many viable alternatives being tested by the Department of Transportation, and this is really the only one that purports to use the lower 900 band. In this manner. So it's important to note when we talk about this here and all of the comments that SIA is putting in this docket. Broadly, we do support the idea of a backup GPS system. We're very supportive of having an alternative that works and is reliable, but it's just important to note that there are other options that would not have to utilize this band. So then separately, another important thing to note in our timeline is in September of 2025, a study commissioned by SIA and produced by Pericle Communications was filed in both of these dockets, essentially proving that the interference that our engineers of our companies have raised red flags about would happen. So this report essentially takes the proposal put forward by the petitioner and measures with their parameters, essentially in an environment where they can test against representative security devices to show specifically that there would be this interference if the proposal put forward by the petitioner goes through. And then also a more recent update, there's been congressional public concern about this. The House recently passed appropriations language seeking to protect the lower 900 Part 15 devices. And then also, again, these are all publicly available, but we just have a quick timeline on here too, seeing all of the comments that SIA has put in the record about this, as well as the defense of the technical analysis in the Pericle study.
Thanks, Lauren. So what other industries and groups actually care about this issue?
There's a lot of groups. I know we mentioned it. There's the kind of a broad cross-industry opposition to this proposal just because of the massive impact in the lower 900 band. There's utilities that are affected by this, retail stores that use RFID for tracking. There's also transportation stakeholders, such as the tolling industry in this space. So just to kind of put these in perspective, there's over 1,000 opposition comments from the industry sectors that are affected that have been filed in opposition to the petition on the FCC docket. And then again, I noted this already, but the separate FCC docket on PNT alternatives more generally has over 200 comments, including the other viable solutions that wouldn't use the lower 900 band, and the Department of Transportation testing the options. We've also talked about Congress weighing in on the concerns. Not only has the appropriations language been a pretty strong public statement of concern, but the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has sent a letter to the FCC on this issue. And then specifically, there's two pieces of language that went through the House Appropriations Financial Services Committee. And that is report language expressing their concern broadly with the impact of reconfiguring or repurposing the lower 900 megahertz band. And then also a funds limitation amendment that requests that none of the funds made available to the FCC under the Appropriations Act be used for the reconfiguring or repurposing of the 902 to 928 megahertz band in a manner that authorizes high power terrestrial operations. So, pretty strong statement of concern from Congress. And then also, it's important to note, we talk about the security industry technical impact, but it's not just the security technology providers that are concerned from a public safety perspective. Four of the major public safety associations, IAFC, IACP, APCO, and NSA, filed a joint letter of opposition and concern about the petition, requesting that the FCC deny the proposal, largely due to the impact that it would have on public safety operations that rely on devices that operate in the lower 900.
Thanks, Lauren. So turning to Howard, um, what do we know about the actual impact of this based on the studies that have been done so far?
Well, thanks, Jake. I mean, what the Pericle Communications study, and Pericle wasn't even the only one who provided input to the FCC on this. What they showed is that the receiver sensitivity of these billions of devices in the lower 900 band would be, basically rendered unusable for most devices in large parts of the service area. And it's a pretty simple concept. You think about a library, you think about people sitting at desks in a library, everyone whispering, and those whispers are essentially what unlicensed devices are doing. You can not be disrupted by your neighbor's conversation. You cannot be disrupted by conversation with someone across the room because everyone's whispering. Now imagine somebody walks through that library with a bullhorn. Everyone's conversations are interfered with. And that is effectively what NextNav has proposed to do in the lower 900 megahertz band.
Howard,
And
if you
so,
go ahead.
sorry, so this study, so we sort of go through the specifics of what the environment is. When we talk about the lower 900 megahertz band, it's essentially 26 megahertz of spectrum in the lower 900 range. As Jake and Lauren both, I believe, mentioned earlier, you've got a variety of devices in the band. You've got motion sensors, you've got various RFID tags and readers and access systems. You've got carbon monoxide detectors, flood sensors, security cameras, wildfire detection systems. So I mean, there really is an incredible amount of devices in this band, and the way that the unlicensed devices operate is unlicensed devices can operate throughout these 26 megahertz, and what they do is they basically frequency hop. So they try to tune to one channel. If that channel is not available, they tune to another channel. That second channel is not available, they tune to a third channel. They hop using sort of spread spectrum technology to find signal. But I mean, they're obviously they're limited by the amount of power that they're allowed to emit, as we sort of show in the slide. This picture gives you sort of a sense of a number of various devices that most people have in their, whether it's a residential home, whether it's an apartment building, in some cases whether it's a commercial building. I mean, these are pretty basic but also pervasive devices that everybody has, and the commonality of these devices is they all use the lower 900 megahertz band. So this slide sort of shows you the how NextNav's proposal would change the band. The sort of top two bars show how the band is configured today. Both the top one is sort of in general. You've got certain licensees that are in these specific parts. NextNav in particular, we've shown in the middle bar, which shows where NextNav currently has licenses to provide services. And then the bottom one is the most important one for this discussion, because this is what NextNav is proposing to do. They are proposing to have a nationwide allocation where they would take, if you look at that on the left-hand side, the bottom part of the band for a 5 megahertz uplink channel, and then the top 10 megahertz of the band for a downlink channel. The rest of LMS licenses would be kind of squished in between. And then for the unlicensed devices, where we're currently allowed to sort of hop from frequency to frequency, depending upon channel to channel, depending on what's available. I mean, it would be, if you look at the sort of dark blue, that's where NextNav would be operating at 4,000 watts as compared to what current licensees operate at today, which is about 2.5 watts. And so they would, being able to operate an unlicensed device either in the uplink or downlink band would be basically impossible. But really, one of the key conclusions from the Pericle study was that even in that middle slice you see right now, even in the adjacent band to where NextNav is operating, the adjacent band interference, the what are called out of band emissions from NextNav's uplink and downlink signals would be so significant that the unlicensed devices wouldn't work in that portion either. And so, like I said, this is just sort of a summary of it. So, as I mentioned, there's the 5 megahertz uplink, the 10 megahertz downlink, and then NextNav signal, the downlink would transmit at roughly 4,000 watts. Current unlicensed devices, the Part 15 devices, like the ones we talked about, are currently limited to 2.5 watts. And, this would result in a severe reduction in the range and operational capability of current Part 15 devices. And again, not just even on what would be the NextNav uplink and downlink channels, but even in that portion in between. Another thing that we've talked about in the Pericle study showed is, in addition to NextNav making it virtually impossible for unlicensed devices to work in the band, the presence of these billions of unlicensed devices trying to communicate, again, trying to whisper over the bullhorn of NextNav shouting throughout the band, that in and of itself, because you'd have billions of devices trying to whisper, trying to send a signal and communicate back to a hub, for example, that would also cause interference to NextNav. So its proposed solution would not even be effective. And NextNav has tried to kind of explain away our and others' interference studies that demonstrate the harmful interference they would cause. But what they've been, eerily quiet on is that issue I just talked about, which is the interference that they would also cause to that the billions of unlicensed devices would cause to NextNav. So the Pericle study does essentially two different types of modeling: outdoor modeling and indoor modeling. So for the outdoor modeling, it's sort of wide area coverage modeling using real world data like topographical data, and then Monte Carlo simulations, which is something the Federal Communications Commission is very familiar with, for basically simulating indoor interference. And the Pericle study evaluated sort of three different types of devices, three different sort of categories. Low throughput devices such as panic buttons, motion sensors, carbon monoxide alarms. Then, kind of medium throughput devices such as wireless microphones, headsets, license-free two-way radios. These are all very, very important for first responders. And then higher throughput devices such as security cameras. And so, we've evaluated all three of these different types to see what the impact would be. So for the outdoor modeling, what we found is that I won't go into the details of the specifics, but what we basically found is that the impact of interference would be substantial. then again, so there's the Monte Carlo simulations, which are basically like indoor modeling. It takes receiver blocking and adjacent channel interference into account, uses indoor path loss, um, and it uses the 3GPP emission mask. And the relevance of that is that's an emission mask. NextNav has said that they are going to, what they would have is a full-on 5G signal. So the 3GPP emission mask shows the impact of adjacent channel interference, even outside of NextNav's uplink and downlink. And so this, graph sort of shows for the Monte Carlo simulations, it's a breakdown of distance and by category of device. Again, that low throughput, medium, and high. You see here the probability of interference, and obviously the closer you are to a NextNav base station, the higher the interference. But the higher throughput devices, sort of experience the greater kind of across the board, as you sort of go up and down, even distance wise, interference. But all of these, again, when you're talking about security devices, when you're talking about public safety devices, when you're talking about utility monitoring, when you're talking about aviation, all of these groups have all weighed in with the FCC, and it's because they can't afford for their devices to be receiving this type of interference. So again, what the Pericle study concluded was that it would cause intolerable interference to many of these key public safety and security devices. As I mentioned earlier, it also concluded that the NextNav network itself would receive intolerable amounts of interference from these billions of unlicensed devices trying to communicate with their hubs. And I think that what our engineers who did this study have a lot of experience with sort of public safety devices, but also with 5G networks, with full-on wireless networks. And what they kind of concluded was there's just complete incompatibility between trying to have a full-on 5G network at the full power you need to do a full 5G network with these unlicensed devices. They're just not compatible to share the same spectrum environment.
Thanks, Howard. So following on to that, the petitioners made a number of claims about the evidence that you just went through. What do people need to know about these claims?
Well, I mean, they sort of tried to cherry pick, various things and use different models than what we actually used in our study. And so, I mean, our view is they didn't, they were trying to make sort of an apples to oranges comparison. They didn't use the actual modeling that we used, and where they used their own modeling, it was very kind of best case scenario situations. And again, I mean, we came to the same conclusion that a lot of other groups did, which is when you look at the engineering, when you look at the impact of having sort of a noise floor as loud as it would with 5G systems, there's no way you can have the systems being compatible. And NextNav sort of talks about that they have some secret technology or something to allow compatibility. Our engineers have looked at this, and we don't see anything that would mitigate the harmful interference.
Thanks, Howard. So, we know that the FCC is interested in making sure there is eventually a backup for P&T services, and they've been collecting information on these, as Lauren mentioned. What can you tell us about the alternatives that would to provide that kind of capability that would not involve this kind of disruption?
Well, first of all, Jake, just to reiterate, everybody, including C and its members, absolutely recognize that GPS is increasingly being, jammed and spoofed. And so, we applaud the Trump administration for exploring alternatives to GPS. This is an effort that's been going on for quite some time. The Department of Transportation, going back several administrations, have been evaluating different technologies to provide an alternative to GPS. And there are a lot of exciting alternatives. There are tests going on involving television broadcast airwaves. There's another one involving radio broadcast airwaves. There's another involving other terrestrial solutions. There are a number of other satellite solutions. So, from our perspective, there are plenty of other alternatives out there. The Department of Transportation is evaluating these tests now. And the key common factor that all of those other types share is that none of them involve the incredible disruption to a band and to billions of devices that NextNav would. NextNav is the only outlier of a proposed PNT alternative solution that would have this incredibly negative, harmful impact on this huge, billion device ecosystem.
Thanks, Howard. So we definitely are hearing from our members some questions about what to expect next, and wanted to see what you think.
Well, what we expect next is we understand that the FCC is going to take the next step in the exploration of alternatives to GPS. And that next step, because the FCC did a notice of inquiry last year, the next step would be to do a notice of proposed rulemaking to explore those alternatives. Now, we're not sure what form that would take. Usually a notice of proposed rulemaking includes tentative conclusions. We don't believe the FCC is at a point where it has tentative conclusions yet about these various alternatives, but we do expect probably sometime this summer that the FCC is going to be asking additional questions about the various PNT alternatives.
Right, thank you. So as we continue to monitor this really closely, we'll turn it back to Lauren. What should security firms do at this point? The question many of our members are asking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this question I can kind of think of in two parts in terms of what steps we would recommend for you to take, and then also what resources we can provide to you. So on this next slide in a minute, we'll show we have a QR link there that links to a landing page on the SIA website. And that's where we're posting all of our public resources on protecting the lower 900 band. You can see we have a two-pager on this that kind of has some short, impactful statements about the issue itself, so you can learn more that way. We also have the Pericle study posted on the website, so that's a great resource to bring to your engineers and anyone who has more in-depth questions about the petition itself. We also post our blog posts there, so you can kind of track what our team is doing. And that way, we also very much recommend that security firms support our advocacy on this issue. As Howard's mentioned, this is something that we still need to be an active voice on to continue to advocate for security devices. And I found that we're a very valuable voice in these conversations for many reasons, because of the technical expertise that we can bring to the table, and as well as the fact that the device ecosystem that we're representing is high reliability devices that are supposed to work 100% of the time. So any level of interference does have massive implications for security and life safety. And it's really important that that's considered as a part of these conversations on backup GPS and backup PNT. And so definitely we encourage security firms to reach out to us with any questions, support our advocacy, as well as I know we might get into this with some of the specific questions in the chat, but if you're aware of specific stakeholders that you want to make sure they're being considered as part of this process, both dockets are still open, and so you are able to submit individual comments at the FCC as well, just kind of showing specific level impacts to your types of devices.
Thanks, Lauren. So, one question we did see in the chat was about high security facilities and the potential effect on emergency communications. And it is a really important point because our nation's military facilities and many of the critical infrastructure uh, sites are protected by alarm systems, intrusion detection systems, access control that use wireless. Um, Locks and also things like panic buttons, emergency alerts. These are all things that would affect those type of facilities just as they would in the commercial sector. And so there's definitely a significant homeland security, national security impact here that needs to be considered. And so that was a important point that came up in the chat. So with that, I just want to thank you guys both for being here and thank all of you online for watching. And like we said, please be in touch with us. To learn more, and we're look forward to working with others in the industry and other partners as well on this really important issue. Thanks so much.